Yeah, I'll leave that talk off of the recording. Yeah.
Right. Oh
Uh,
man.
but
Well, you're made of stronger stuff than I am. Yeah.
yeah, well, there's a few that we have to get through. You requested the Love Guru, by the way. I mean, that's a
Oh
different
hell yeah,
kind
I
of
did. Yeah.
that's a different
Yeah.
kind of
Well, because
gore.
you know what, I am such a fan of Mike Myers that I'm sort of looking for that silver lining even in his worst stuff. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Now, what now? Who would you choose in the end, Wayne or Austin Powers? I'm a pretty hardcore Wayne guy in the end.
Oh, totally Austin Powers. Yeah,
Okay, that's cool.
yeah,
No, I just
definitely. Yeah.
I think it was on the Prisoner podcast where Mark was kind of talking a little crap about Austin Powers. That's like, okay, I'll let you talk crap about that, but if you but not Wayne's World too. That's off limits.
Oh, funny, funny. Uh,
Let me bring up my notes and put up a prologue.
yeah, yeah,
You get a short prologue. I didn't put
yeah.
the
Right.
inner title part. I almost thought that Rod wasn't going to show up, but
No.
which would have been like pretty funny.
It's yeah, yeah. It is quick though. Yeah.
Share screen, but yeah, I made it through the battling butlers, and I've seen Steamboat Bill and the general before. I have not
Yeah.
seen the cameraman, so that's still one I'm looking forward to be new.
Cameraman I saw ages ago at like a library screening kind of thing, you know. It was good, but the general I think is just awesome. And I can't believe that I haven't seen Steamboat Bill because it's just, you know,
I
that fire it fires on a lot of my interest, you know.
Why confuse that with when I was like 20, I confused it with Sherlock Jr. So I was going out to watch Sherlock Jr. and then ended up
Uh
watching Steamboat Bill instead, which is great. But I'm like,
oh, fun. Yeah.
it's like one of those times you go and see a movie and it's not the movie you think you were gonna go see.
Right.
Um
Right.
like last year when I thought I was going to see Last Night in Soho when I was actually watching Nightmare Alley, I'm like, why haven't they gotten to
Oh,
the
funny.
ethereal movie theater yet? So
Funny.
the whole, a good movie kind of also kind of disturbing. I'm like, oh, we never got to the.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I totally conflated those in my head.
That's funny.
But
Uh,
oh, and yeah, the rental store I keep referring to as we still have a rental store is finally biting the dust. Yeah, so
what?
Sunday morning I'm gonna go. Right now they're selling off their stuff, so they have like Blu-rays for it's like $3 a pop, but Sunday, their last day, it should be like $1 a pop. So I made
Oh,
a little
wow.
catch for myself, which might be fleeced by the time I get there. But I mean, you can get
Right.
streaming or whatever. But
Right,
if you can get
right.
like what they have, they had Nick Cage's The Wicker Man and Left Behind, which is on my list. So uh, they
Yes.
had 5 copies of
Yes.
Venom on Blu-ray still, so I'm pretty sure I'll still be able to score one of
Damn.
those.
Oh my God.
Cinema
Wow.
Paradiso,
Oh, one of my all-time favorite movies.
Untouchable, which is not The Untouchables, but
Which one is
I
Untouchable?
don't know. It's on our list, and everyone's
Okay.
The Untouchables. I'm like, no, it's a different movie, and I
It's
found
just
it. So
Untouchable. Okay.
unless it gets touched by Sunday morning, but
Right.
yeah. I told
Uh,
my wife and daughter go there and scour the anime because my daughter was regularly going over there and renting anime, which I guess you can't do anymore. So
hmm. Oh, wow.
so a 14 almost 14-year old in 2023 was actually renting DVDs every week.
Wow. Wow. What a throwback.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
wait, I'm seeing Untouchable 2019.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, hang on. Starring Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, as himself. Yeah.
Oh,
So it's
right.
a documentary about.
Oh no, that I think this is a maybe it's Intouchable.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's see here.
Yeah, and it's not a
Intouchable. That one
documentary.
showed up
I
as
think
a
it has a
list.
guy in like a wheelchair or something, and it is I can't remember which actor, but it's a notable actor, and it's not Harvey Weinstein.
Huh. All right. Let's see.
Intouchable.
Yeah. Weird, man.
Oh, as in he is untouchable. Yeah, right. Well, not anymore.
Hmm.
There. Oh, 2011 French buddy comedy. Okay, I
Oh,
actually it's
okay.
just no, he just looks like Sam Waterston, but he's not. He's a French actor. Okay.
Okay. That's what you want to be in your career is the French Sam Waterston.
Yeah, just like on
That's-
the box, I just saw it and that's what I
yeah.
thought. So, it is known as Untouchable
Yeah.
in England, so I wasn't completely wrong. Okay. In fact, that's probably the box I was looking at because
Yeah,
sometimes we get like the British version. So like I just got the Hitchcock set, but it's the British version because it has
yeah.
Japanese subtitles, but does not have North by Northwest. So I had to buy that separately.
Oh, interesting, interesting.
Otherwise, it's the same set. And yeah, my
Yeah.
wife was like, so I was like, wait a minute, it says 18 on it. I'm like, yeah, that's for Psycho, which we already watched, and we watched Bates Motel, which is much worse than Psycho. So don't worry about it.
Oh my God.
I think the only one that doesn't have Japanese subtitles is Topaz, but I can live
Okay.
with that. Well, I mean, I can watch
Yeah,
it anyway if I really want to, but that's the one in there I want to watch the least probably. So
sure.
I did hear something about that one though, like he wanted to, like the use of color was supposed to advance the plot or something.
Hmm.
Like when you see red, it's supposed to actually be a plot detail or something. I don't know. I haven't watched. Maybe I do need to watch it, but yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But when you have like all the James Stewart and Saboteur and stuff, that cuts ahead of in line. I think.
Right, right,
I don't.
right.
I don't think I've seen the '60s ones. I don't think I've seen Marnie before. Yeah, I haven't seen Family Plot.
I've never seen Family Pie. I've got Marnie on tape, actually. Good movie. You know, not among the best, but it's good. It's
Yeah,
entertaining.
yeah. Once you're past
Yeah,
Psycho, nothing's
yeah,
quite up to. I mean, none of them really like
exactly.
crap the bed or anything, but yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I guess we
All
will
right.
plop on into this podcast.
Cool. Let's do it.
Hello, welcome to Time Enough Podcast. It's where we travel through time to get into all the episodes of The Twilight Zone and beyond. This is Matt here, coming back from the Mission Log Podcast is John Champion. Welcome back.
Hey, I am here. I am back all the way from Mission Log. Good to be here, man.
And I know this is your request, and this is one I had not come across before. So just a few weeks ago, I was just doing getting ready for it. And I was like, oh crap, Buster Keaton's in this. I didn't know he was in the Twilight
Yeah,
Zone, but
yeah,
who
yeah.
apparently had a pretty notable second career on television, which I'd never, because he had his own show for 2 years, I think, and would show
Not
up
very long.
here,
Yeah.
there, and everywhere.
Well,
Um,
I think this is a cool time, late 50s to, mid to late 60s, when a lot of these really famous classic movie stars get this second career, and some better than others. You've got Buster Keaton here, and then Charlie Chaplin, of course, maintain somewhat a career, even late and in exile, wrote his book. And then you have people on the other end of the spectrum like Bela Lugosi making all the Ed Wood movies. But it must have been very cool, to be part of that TV audience, late 50s, early 60s, and you turn around and like, wow, there's somebody who their fame started in the 1920s. Like that's kind of cool to me.
and watching this episode was a bit of a mind blower for me because I had seen his 20 stuff. I hadn't seen his talkies. I hadn't seen his TV appearances. So watching this last week was the first time I actually heard him talk.
Oh wow, cool.
Um, and last night I put on a little bit of Speak Easily just out of curiosity. I
Okay.
couldn't. That's on YouTube. What No Beer is not on YouTube. I would have watched that if that had. Although Keaton himself said Speak Easily, he was proud of, and What No Beer he was not. So probably
Okay.
because
Well,
he was
fair.
because
Yeah.
he was drinking too much beer for that one. But
Right.
but
Oh
watch it.
well.
It was okay. It was it's like a pre-code movie, right?
Yeah.
His voice is good, and when he was still like 36, because in his Twilight Zone, he's got the ravages of age on his voice a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I
Um,
figured out he was 67 when this was
right.
made. Yeah.
But yeah, in 1932, his speaking voice it was pretty good. I mean, he did do vaudeville, so I guess he had to already
Yeah.
have that skill. And but yeah, it was just weird, like seeing a younger Keaton talking. That really didn't compute for me. So
Right. And just physically, he looks very different here. Like, Chaplin as the tramp could play that character for a good 30 years. And, Keaton, as he aged, got a little broader, a little heavier, doesn't quite look like the guy that you remember, that, skinny, lanky kid in The General or Steamboat Bill or something else.
Well, the thing is, he didn't really add accoutrements like
Hmm.
Charlie Chaplin or Harold Lloyd were pretty handsome guys that kind of like derped themselves up a little bit.
Right,
The tramp got,
exactly.
Harold Lloyd
Yeah,
would often go with the Clark Kent glasses just to make him look a little less like movie
yeah.
starish.
And
And
with Keaton, it was the eyes, and then sometimes that little flat hat that you see him in here. So I think that's kind of a nod to a look that you would have seen him in, but still not quite exact. It wasn't quite as signature as like Chaplin as the Tramp.
yeah, since I've been drawing Keaton, I've got my old timey hats here, but none of them are flat enough, right? So I need
Right.
to. Yeah, I gotta get a flatter one.
There we go. Yeah. Nice.
So get the pork
Nice.
pie hat.
Yeah.
Let me roll through a bit of the trivia on this one before, because
Yeah,
I mean we
please.
probably will just be talking about Keaton quite a bit, but let's
Yep.
get the
Mhm.
get the business out of the way.
Yeah.
Original air date was December 15th, 1961. Norman Z. McLeod directed. He previously did so with the Marx Brothers' Monkey Business and Horse Feathers, which makes him, absolute gold in my book. He also directed some of the Topper films. They were on my classic film obsessed aunt's bookshelf, but I never quite got around to watching those. Um,
Oh,
I,
Topper's great. Yeah.
I did get to the Thin Man eventually, which were also well. When you're 5 or 6 years old, Topper, it's like, oh, it's a ghost, and then you're like, this is, when you're 7 years old, it doesn't connect. The
Right.
Marx Brothers
Right.
do. The Marx Brothers
Yeah.
do, and I think the Thin Man, we had an obsession with when I was in my early 20s. I think it took to my early 20s to get that, which makes sense. You need to be able to drink martinis if you're going to be
Yeah.
watching
Oh,
Thin Man.
exactly. Yeah, it's required. Yeah.
Richard Matheson wrote the teleplay, though I do hope they were letting Buster Keaton punch up some of the gags. I don't. I mean, that was his job in the '40s. So,
Yeah. Right.
uh, Woodrow Mulligan was played by Buster Keaton. I'm probably going to be spewing trivia about Buster for this entire episode. I already have been, but if the name is not ringing a loud enough bell, just watch Sherlock Jr. on YouTube right now. Yes, pause the podcast, watch it, and then get back to us. Rolio was no slouch. He was played by Stanley Adams. Adams would pop up in films such as Death of a Salesman and Breakfast at Tiffany's, but the Trekkie in me cannot neglect to mention that he was Cyrano Jones in Star Trek's The Trouble with Tribbles.
There we go.
Yeah. Milton Parsons was Professor Gilbert. He may have not been a beautiful butterfly, but he was a character actor standard in the 40s to 60s, appearing in a multitude of those workmanlike roles. William Lava provided the old timey score at the beginning and end of this one. If that's not good enough for you, he also scored the 60s Looney Tunes cartoons and composed the theme for Gunsmoke and scored the music for my favorite Zorro, 1939 Zorro's Fighting Legion, which I liked that when I was 8. So I
Oh,
don't get
cool.
it
All right.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
You
on
have you have many varied tastes. That's great. Yeah.
that's one of the ones you would get off the supermarket racks. That's why, yeah, my mom would
Right.
like organize the cards and stuff at supermarkets. So I'd go and
Yeah.
find the public access, not public access, public domain.
Right.
And I went on like a
Yes.
2 year search to find the second tape to complete the Buck Rogers serial. I only had like
Oh,
episodes
there we
one through
go.
six, right?
Oh
So
man.
that's how you were driven crazy in the '80s, I guess. Hold on, I'm gonna show you the prologue. You get a nice short one as opposed to the books some people have been
Yeah,
getting
right.
recently.
Yeah.
I think, oh, you got a book last time, I think.
I did. Yeah, yeah. It was quite a long one. Here we go. Mr. Mulligan, a rather dour critic of his times, is shortly to discover the import of that old phrase, out of the frying pan into the fire, said fire burning brightly at all times in the twilight zone.
Okay. For me, the most burning question for this episode is time helmet or Spock helmet?
Man, I absolutely thought exactly the same thing, and I want to see this prop so badly because in my mind's eye, it does have that little spinny barber pole kind of part of it. I thought that it had to be red and white, but the rest of it I couldn't quite tell. Is it black and silver? Is it also red and white? I love that the sparklers are already lit, so you know that there was some PA on set who had to make sure that they were always refilling and relighting the sparklers. when they showed it. Um, but I love that prop. I want to cosplay that prop. I think it's great. I hope somebody somewhere kept it. And I just love the idea of a helmet that does all of that, because that's a very late 50s, early 60s kind of thing. Like if you were watching Space Patrol, if you were watching Tom Corbett, if you were watching Buck Rogers, if you were going to order a premium, it might be a ray gun, but 99% of the time it's going to be a space helmet. So this is fit right in with that.
Yeah, and I actually that was when I was watching Speak Easily, but yeah, then I was seeing like the Destination Moon helmets and stuff, which of course those are much more
Yes.
streamlined, but
Yeah.
yeah, just that whole aesthetic of the time. And
Well, and it's odd. Like this was a very 1950s, 1960s sci-fi, but whimsical sci-fi prop. It was not a 19th century sci-fi prop. You know, like I feel like they went out of their way to make it look something more like a kid would come up with in the 50s than than what a scientist would come up with in the late 19th century.
yeah, I guess if someone were doing this today, it would be more like a steampunk thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so which that I mean that'd be cool too. But yeah, I definitely like
Yeah.
this. The sparklers, you know, keeping it up. Just obviously he's not putting himself in too much danger at age 67, but you know, you do
Right.
sparklers and stand in a bit of traffic, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
Um, because I was like I said, I've been hardcoring the films last week, which the vehicular stuff here, the battling butler, how is he? He's like, be careful how you drive. We're city folks and these are country folks. And then he just starts to do the most insane driving like ever, like between cars going on the wrong side of the street and stuff.
of
So
course.
yeah, good
Of
stuff.
course.
But
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, I've been hardcoring these, so I've for the past month just been doing a bunch of Buster Keaton, and I still haven't even gotten to the shorts. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
now I've
Yeah.
heard some people say the beginning and end of this is divisive, like having the silent parts, which seems weird.
I mean, I don't know, but it's weird that that would be divisive, because I certainly you would hope that an audience now would be savvy enough, but I would think that an audience in 1961, 62 would be savvy enough to realize, oh, look, we're sitting down to watch a thing that stars Buster Keaton. He was a silent movie star. Um, that's not a big ask out of that audience to put themselves in the mindset that they were 35 years ago watching a Buster Keaton film. Like I think that that's a little nod of genius to honor your guest star that week.
Oh, I absolutely love it, but
Yeah,
I am wondering, like, one, maybe people at this point might have actually known him better from TV at this point, so that
could be.
could have thrown them off. And what was last week's episode? Okay, before this was The Jungle, Still Valley, Midnight Sun, Death's Head, which we did.
Yeah.
Those are, I guess, tonally, that is a bit of an ask if you aren't already familiar with. And I guess in the late 60s is because they would have been. I know they were showing old Hollywood films, but maybe silent films did not
Yeah.
make it so much to TV because they were silent.
I have to wonder. Yeah, I mean, I feel like every generation has to rediscover how brilliant those silent films are from the greats. You know, you talk about Chaplin, Keaton, and Lloyd, and certainly there were many other greats, but those three are the ones who kind of always rise to the top. And it feels like every several years you get those playing in a revival house, or there's a new release on home video, you know, home media of some sort. um, but I have to wonder if, say, a 15-year-old in 1961 compared to a 15-year-old, not like a film studies major or somebody somebody like who's just really into cinema history, but would they have already seen more silent movies in their media consumption diet at that time? Because yeah, TV was showing movies when they could, but that wasn't all the time. There were only a handful of channels, and you couldn't just go down to a store and rent something. So I don't know. I don't know where those would be seen and how often they would be seen. I would think that a young audience back then would have some familiarity, just because probably I think the pop culture consciousness would have absorbed a good amount of that, you know. I think today you can show somebody an image of a little tramp, and even if they haven't seen a Charlie Chaplin movie, they know that that's Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, I was about to say my introduction to silent film would be probably watching the Electric Company in the early '80s, where they had
Hmm.
I think it was a lady dressed up as a tramp doing little
Hmm.
skits on the Electric Company. Um,
Cool.
you know, Sesame Street kids couldn't handle that with
No.
no talking. I guess so it was for the Electric Company. Um,
That's right.
and then from that public domain supermarket thing, I got a really terrible version of Metropolis, which ran
Oof.
90 minutes, was too
Oh,
fast,
no.
and
Yeah.
the score of the whole thing. I remember the score because I did watch it a lot, which is dun, 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 dun,
Wow.
dun,
So, so
that's
it's definitely neither the Jeff Mills nor the Giorgio Moroder
correct.
restored. Yeah.
For that one, the best I saw, this was probably late '90s, so it was still a shorter version of Metropolis, but it was the
Mhm.
Alloy Orchestra, playing live on a version that was quite cool. So
Very cool.
yeah, I've
Nice.
never been able to warm up to the Marauder version, but I will put on the Blu-ray of the maybe it's the second the best version or most restored version, and I'll just play my own music over it.
Oh yeah. Oh cool.
So that I mean, I was doing that with some of the Keaton films too, because what you get on YouTube is basically,
Yeah.
again, it's the old timey piano, which is perfect here. The William
Sure.
Wyler
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
fantastic here, but maybe not there. Not for the real thing. I'd like to hear better music.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree.
If I were to make a complaint about the silent part, is they had the sped up look, which
Yeah.
I think now when you watch a silent film, people know to play it at the right speed usually.
Right. Yeah. But, I feel like that didn't really become a thing until within the last generation. I'd say within the last 30 to 40-ish years, where we really got good about that. And playing things in their proper speed. I feel like okay, so let's create a scenario. If you are a young person in the early 60s and you do have access to these movies, you're probably getting them on like an 8 millimeter reel that you're having to play at the school, or maybe play on a home projector, and the playback speed is probably all wrong no matter what you do. So I feel like most people back then probably had that as part of their language, their internalized language about silent movies, is if the runtime is just going to be completely wrong,
And
you know.
I think it was my dad who was disappointed when we did see proper Metropolis, because the
Oh
workers marching in and out of the city, he didn't like the
yeah.
slow clump. He liked the sped
Oh
up one
really?
better. Yeah,
Really? Oh,
for him
that's funny.
that was more effective for him.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Interesting. Yeah.
um, we do get a fair amount of gags here. Which one stuck the most for you? This is definitely the most gaggy Twilight Zone.
There are a lot of some of those gags wore on me a little bit, because like here's the thing. If you do a show where you're hiring Buster Keaton, and for that matter Stanley Adams, who just from you and I watching Star Trek or anything else, he's a guy who plays it up a bit. Like, we have repetitive gags when you get into the repair shop. You have Keaton. I liked the bit with the TV, but I thought the bit with the TV overstayed its welcome a bit. And then you've got the bit with the vacuum cleaner, which they do twice. And I wondered if that one had earned being in there twice. And even getting locked in the sarcophagus, it's like, we can just see that it's kind of a wooden cutout. There's no lock on it. How could he get lost in there? So I thought those were kind of weak. I think the strongest one, I think one of the best ones, was the pants.
Oh
The
yeah.
the bit, yeah, the bit with the pants, pure gold,
What's the
because
message of this episode?
and never leave home without your pants.
Don't travel through time without your fans.
Yeah. Um, but it's a three-part gag where you've got the first gag of Keaton walking behind Stanley Adams behind Rollo, and then switching positions so he can be in front of him, and then that alley oop with the pants. I just all of that was timed great. It looked great. It didn't oversell or overstay its welcome. But that's the weird thing about this show is that you're writing gags to take advantage of the strength of the actors that you've got. And you know that the audience mostly knows who Keaton is, and they know what his strengths are from the movies that he did 35, 40 years before this aired, right? But that type of comedy is very incongruous, not only with modern 1961 TV, but certainly with a show like The Twilight Zone, which is very cerebral, often very dark. So it's a little weird. It's a little like watching children's theater, you know, where everything is telegraphed to the audience, and it takes you out of the reality of a very unreal situation. So
Yeah,
it's odd. Yeah.
yeah, that like the alley oop was a bit of a trademark. I think that was his
Hmm.
dad's trademark. He was able to do that, like basically put both legs up on a table or something.
Hmm.
And
Nice.
when
Nice.
Donald O'Connor was playing Buster Keaton a few years earlier, that was one of the things he could not do. So because I think
Oh,
they
wow.
wanted that to be in the movie, and he just like couldn't figure it out. So,
Wow.
a little different
Yeah.
in this one. I don't think it was the full dad trick, but just those little touchstones in there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and watching a lot of the 20s stuff, I does his comedy not quite work as well simply physically because he is older. I
Mm.
was one of the other reasons I've been hardcore in Keaton is we had this coming up, and the Blank Check podcast has been doing all Keaton this month, so I don't follow that.
Nice. Yeah.
And they come up with the point that one of the things that's funniest about him is he looks tired all the time.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't
Right.
like he
Yeah.
doesn't care about his victories.
Yeah.
But at age 67 looking tired all the time isn't funny.
That's true. He was the great stone face, and that was the part of the gag, was just not reacting to things. But part of the gag was when you watch a Keaton film, and the most recent one that I watched all the way through is The General, but I'm familiar with a lot of the gags that he did over time, is that they are so complex and they are so choreographed to within the inch on screen. I mean, there's the famous shot of him standing in front of the building, that the facade just falls down over him and his body passes through the open window while that facade falls down. And he stays perfectly still during that. And again, no reaction, no facial reaction at all. And stuff like that is really pushing the technique to the limit. Here we're on a TV budget, and you've got a 67-year-old Keaton, and you've got kind of everything scaled down a bit. So it lacks some of the wow factor that you would get from just watching a Buster Keaton movie from when Keaton was in his prime.
I did I experimented on my 5-year-old students
No, nice.
during
As one does. Yeah.
during snack time. I put on
Mm.
last week. I put on you know the start of the astral projection stuff in Sherlock Junior. And
Okay.
at first the kids are looking, I'm what are you doing? What are you making me? Why did you put this on? Within 2 minutes, they were like laughing at it uproariously. Once it gets
Oh,
to
that's
him,
great.
once he's on screen, it's cutting from like ridiculous situation to ridiculous situation.
Yeah.
The lions were there, and the unit was animals, so it still kind of fit right. A few days
Yeah.
ago, I put on the the Stampede from the end of Go West. That one
Mm.
did not take as well, though they did like seeing all the cows. But yeah, it
Yeah.
didn't quite have the firepower of that Sherlock Junior. But yeah, I mean that
Right.
I'm making 5-year-old kids in 2023 like properly laugh, which
Good.
I didn't think they were
Good.
going to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially after the first 10 seconds, I said, "Ooh, that was a bad call." But
But see, but the stuff holds up, and I'm not saying that this episode doesn't hold up, but I think Keaton at his peak is a very different thing from Keaton here, and they're playing to what they think the audience wants out of Keaton from this time, and it's just not as sharp, it's not as epic and impressive as what he was doing so many years before. But that's it's not his fault. I mean, he's an older guy and he's working in a different medium with different parameters. It's just going to be different. But a lot of the mugging for the camera, a lot of the really exaggerated physical stuff, um, it it takes me enough out of what could potentially be the existential horror of, being transported to a time where you absolutely don't fit in both directions, which is part of the fun of this story.
Well, I'll give. I was actually looking at my iPad here to check the album title, but I guess this is basically the akin to the Who's WHO album. Quite good, but if you put it up to Who's Next, it's
yeah, right, right.
But it's still kind of enjoyable.
Yeah.
Conversely, I think my favorite Bowie album is Black Star, which would be kind of his Once Upon a Time sort of trip.
Yeah, sure.
So I mean, it can work the other way too, but
yeah, but I think what's like for us, we're coming at this from our perspective in 2023 and growing up on the media diet that we did. I think it's something that we really can't appreciate is that for the audience watching this for the very first time, you had two potentially. You had people who, well, yeah, they were getting it new, maybe they weren't familiar, but I think that's probably the minority. You had a lot of people who knew exactly who Buster Keaton was, who knew his earlier work, and I think even more interesting than that, you had an audience who potentially grew up during the time that this episode starts. So, I mean, or maybe if they didn't necessarily grow up then, they could have potentially been born then, because we're only talking about a 65-year, is that right? Or no, 70-year difference between when the episode starts and when it takes place. So there are potentially people who remember or very close to remembering this period when the world looked like this, when it looked like 1890s small town America, and then what it changed into, what it became when, Woodrow Mulligan lands in modern contemporary 1960s America.
Yeah, I if I were to play with the script a little bit, I would have made it 1895, match Keaton's actual birth year,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Which is also, I think that's the same year as the Lumiere brothers, the train at station sort of stuff.
Yeah, right.
So Keaton's basically the same age as the movies. So I would have played on that a little more. Although my snarky comment here is, so if sound did not exist before 1927, there's no video before 18 or 90. That means the world is only like 130 years old and some change.
That's it. Can't prove it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. And I get into an argument with creationists about that. The world's only 130 years old. It's 3,000 and something. that would be a great argument to have.
Oh yeah.
Let me. I have a few. Oh, I never said my favorite joke is the bicycle speeds.
Speed
yeah. I like those quite well.
8 miles an hour.
Yeah. Racing bicycles can go 10. I like that. As a guy who just finished doing a podcast on The Prisoner, Harmony is not the town you want to be in. You will get your butt kicked there.
Yeah.
And my one other observation is a little more meaty.
Okay.
In my Keaton Blitz, I also read his autobiography, which is my Wonderful World of Slapstick, I believe is the title, with a ghostwriter. But
okay.
I read that where he's basically like, yeah, I had a few rough years there, but life has been good. He's like, yeah, my father tossed me all over the place, but that's what we did. And in the end, he seemed like especially the guy who's famous from age 5, you know, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
that like his autobiography is relatively uplifting. So after that, I went and I just found, because I could find a PDF, I started looking at memoir or a biography from the 90s, which was like totally like tortured artist stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. I mean, I guess he could have been full of it, but I feel like I'm going to trust what the autobiography a little more, and that the guy like enjoyed his life in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Definitely saying the 30s were not the best for him, and
No. No.
but better than for what Brad Pitt or whatever. So
Yeah. True.
I'm
True.
honestly in the middle of that movie, so I've not finished watching Babylon yet, which I started watching because Mike Richards sold it as a gritty reboot of Singing in the Rain. It's like, yeah, sure, okay.
Well, look, he's not. Yeah, he's not wrong. That movie certainly fetishizes Singing in the Rain. Um, I well, we'll talk about it when you're done with it.
Yeah, I'll have to
I
finish that
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
Are
yeah.
there any other big observations you want to throw out on this one?
Not not particularly. I think this is a light-hearted, fun episode that gets at something that always drives me a little crazy, which is typified by the first day in class. I even forget which class it was, but it was when I was in college, freshman in New York at Fordham, and one of my professors was he was probably in his 70s. He was older than the average professor there, and our first day, he handed out this page that was this diatribe about how, we don't have it as good now, and this was in the 90s. We don't have it as good now as we did, back in his day, and call it whatever, the 50s, the 40s, whatever it was. And it was this long list of things that was like, you know, back then gay meant happy, and back then a Coke was a nickel, and but it's just all this kind of whiny bitchy stuff about the past. And in my head, and I wish I'd done it, to this day I wish I had done it, because in my head I had this response about all the things that were wrong that have shown progress. Not to say that we live in a perfect time now or the 90s at all, but all the things that are progress compared to those things, and not to diminish that there were great things about the past. But I think it's so awful to pigeonhole a time that is your particular favorite and say, like, oh no, this is when things were good, this is when they were right, and everything after that is awful and wrong. And that stuck with me, and I think that there's something sad about the heart of this episode, about what both of these guys want, that is an unrealistic expectation. Here's Keaton's character, who just wants to get away, and he thinks that in the future we will have figured it all out, and that is part of the futurist in me that hopes that the future is a better trajectory than where we are today. You hope that things will look better, but realistically, there's more of it, and there's a lot of noise to deal with and a lot of new problems to deal with. And then you got Rollo's character, Stanley Adams' character, Rollo, who just wants the peace and quiet of the past. And when he gets there, he can't deal with it because he doesn't have those creature comforts that he loves about his time. So neither of these guys is satisfied being displaced from what they know. Although I think it would be, I remember reading an interesting article I've referenced every now and then about how it would be easier for somebody who, say, what is an adult in the 1950s, to time travel forward in the future than it would be for, say, somebody from the 1890s to travel the same distance. So somebody from the 1890s, let's fast forward them 50, 60 years, or somebody from the 1950s, fast forward them 50, 60 years. It would be much, much easier for the person who is settled in their world in the 1950s, because they have things like cars and airplanes and telephones and TVs, and all of that is very common and like understandable technology for them. Somebody from the 1890s, if you suddenly put them into a post World War II, urban environment, they're going to have a really difficult time learning everything new. Not to
Yeah.
say that they can't, but it would be much more difficult.
Yeah, if we go back to 1963, the food's better, right?
Hell yeah.
That
That's
is
what
a
we
multi
learned
reference.
from.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I loved that show. Yeah.
But yeah, and it is interesting that this episode is right at, as we're doing this now, it's pretty much a halfway point. 1890 to this episode to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost
Yeah.
works out perfect. 10 years off, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty wild
And,
to think about.
and it's interesting to see, like, okay, if you make a period piece today about the 1890s, there are no firsthand witnesses you can talk to, and unfortunately it is a well recorded time. And you can watch a show now like Downton Abbey, or what was the one the Gilded Age, about a very specific slice of society, but you have to recreate all of that based on books, based on the bare minimum of film footage and some archival like costumes and furniture and stuff like that. But a show in 1960 referencing 1890, you could probably go talk to somebody at the studio and say, "Hey, does that look authentic?" You could say like, "What would a little, what would this little office, this little professor's place look like?" And would there be chickens hanging out on the side of the road and hanging out on the storm doors there? Yeah, probably so. So yeah, throw some chickens in there. That'll make it look right.
No, you're mentioned the film school thing. So I guess my best, and this is actually a pretty good old Hollywood run in, was also my film class, which I don't remember what year I took it, but we were showing the Miracle of Morgan's Creek, um,
Mm-hmm.
with a guest intro from Eddie Bracken. So he's there, and then he
Oh.
comes and they screen the movie. He comes, sits directly next to me, and it's just kind of like reminiscing a little bit as the movie's playing. So like that was more interesting than the little speech he gave beforehand, right?
Yeah,
It's,
yeah,
he's just,
right.
oh yeah, she was nice.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
he was a pretty class. He was in his 80s by then, but he was a pretty class
Wow.
dude with the run-in. So he was talking maybe a little bit too much over the movie, but hey, he's the star, so you can do that.
Yeah, that's the thing. See, I love. There was a rabbit hole that I went down one time because I was watching Hal Holbrook do his Mark Twain thing, and I always wondered, like, did Mark Twain's voice exist on a recording somewhere? And apparently not. But there is a recording of somebody who knew him well, was an actor, and apparently world renowned for doing voice imitations of the people that he knew. So somebody recorded him doing Mark Twain. And apparently it was as close as you could get, of course, as close as anybody can get to doing a pitch perfect imitation of somebody. And I was like, well, that's cool. Then a piece of tape exists that is as close as you can get to somebody who was there, who heard what he sounded like and could replicate that, but go back far enough and you completely run out of that.
The word
There's
on the
just
street is you did not want to hear Abraham Lincoln make a speech.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard that too. But of course, we all go to Disneyland and you see great moments with Mr. Lincoln, and Walt hired his favorite actor to do the voice because it would be commanding. It would be, but somewhere there's got to be a recording of somebody who heard Lincoln trying to imitate his voice. I would love to hear that.
On a cylinder somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Let's get through the questions that each
yeah.
episode gets to eventually. The first being, who in this episode went into the Twilight Zone?
Two guys, Mulligan and Rollo. So Keaton and Adams. I think they both did.
I'm
And yeah.
see, I'm actually going to go with the audience. I think Keaton is such an icon by this point. Like, it's almost like,
Uh,
I mean, he is the Twilight Zone. His 20s, poker face, the stone face.
Yeah.
That is him looking at you in the 20s is the Twilight Zone, and seeing him in 1961, is kind of the Twilight Zone. Like
Right.
I feel like this is the episode the most Twilight Zone to me. Again, I've been not just this episode, but just been having a full on obsession for the month of May.
Good. Good. I love hearing that, man. That's a good obsession to have.
So I mean, you probably have the right answer, of course, but
No,
but
no, but I like that.
I,
I mean, from the beginning, we've been talking about how this kind of is dependent upon audience perspective in so many ways.
right. So I think the trip it sent me on means I went through the Twilight Zone in this episode, which is is
Nice.
is great. Um,
That's awesome.
well, let's ask first. Did guy I forgot this not Jafferty, McCafferty. No, I'm Mulligan. There we go.
Oh, but by the way, you know who didn't go through the Twilight Zone and just the biggest missed opportunity? Here's Professor Gilbert, who invents the time helmet. And what does he do? He doesn't put it on. He's like, I created this thing, it works. Let's go somewhere else and celebrate.
He's scared of
Gilbert,
sparklers.
you're an idiot. You're an
Okay, so
idiot.
he deserved not going in the Twilight Zone then.
Exactly. Yeah.
So these other two guys deserve their chance to see a different time and get off put by it.
Oh, they had to. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, look, they're not presented as the brightest bulbs, shall we say? They're both kind of they're both just kind of opportunists. They're just sort of floating along in life. I think they're lacking a little bit of perspective or deep thought about certain topics. So I think they needed this. I think both of them needed the little wake up call to slap them back into some acceptance of their own reality.
Here's a mistake. They gave him a name. He's a Mulligan, right? His name
Yeah.
should have been Curmudgeon. Because in the 20s, no, in the 20s they have like in Go West his character's name is Friendless.
Yeah. Right.
I would have gone with Curmudgeon for fun.
That was great.
But and I totally deserved my trip in the Twilight Zones. It's been fun. I still have like 3 or 4 movies to go and some shorts if I want to. So
Good, man. Send us postcards from the Twilight Zone. That's I'm glad you made it.
right on.
Yeah.
How about for the tripometer, 0 to 5?
Look, time travel is the ultimate trip. It's the trip that all of us want. So I get that. But as far as the profundity of that trip, I think it's pretty mild. I think it's right in the middle at like a 2.5. Because again, these aren't the smartest guys who are going through it. They could have picked up the same knowledge from a book. So it's a fun romp for them until they realize that they are fish out of water and they just really need to be back where they belong. But that's not a particularly deep or trippy experience for them to have. So the trippiness is you open your eyes with the sparkler helmet on and you go, wow, I'm in a different place and this is weird and uncomfortable. Now I just want to get back home. So the trippiness of it is pretty insignificant. So 2.5 is where I'm going to land.
Okay. See, my answer, I'm not even going to think about the time travel. I'm just going to go into this has been sending just the synchronicity of events has been had me reading books, watching hours of movies. 3.5 because
you took a trip. That's why.
Yes, I took a trip. And I mean, I'm getting back. The one story I definitely was going to tell on this podcast, so I should do that. When I was about 20, that's the first time when I think that's maybe a little older. Maybe that's when Kino Lorber's getting the videos out or whatever of Keaton.
Yeah.
And I remember one day in university, just deciding I was going with my girlfriend to play like squash or whatever at the University Health Center, gym center. The University of Georgia has this massive athletics building for that. But just deciding when we left the dorm to just do my Buster Keaton impression all night. So, so I think I didn't talk to her the whole way there. And then when we're playing squash, I'm just like doing weird tumbles on the floor and stuff and not changing my expression.
My God.
And I realize even now, it's only been recently where I've taught some classes without masks. I don't know how America does it, but it's like we didn't until like maybe this month.
Yeah.
And I was like, I forgot how much my shtick is actually doing that in class. Like, because some kids think that's too serious because I basically tend to do my own little stone face in classes for fun.
Nice. Yeah.
And like one of the things is when I'm demoing how we're going to do the phonics game, you run up to the board, put them in the right place. I'll
Mhm.
always, and use a timer, so I'll demonstrate first. And I'll always go into like a full sprint, but where I'm like only moving like very slowly, doing my best stone face.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah, this is it's not like I just got obsessed with this. But okay, I guess we'll pull this one into the tank. I don't know what that means. This is a pretty now episode, so you can tell folks what's on mission log this week, which is next week for you. But
Yeah, yeah. So we have Rise coming out. I just prepped that, and then right after that will be Oh Favorite Son, where you get to see, Harry Kim's magnificent chest, and a little light bondage, So it's watershed episode.
50 Shades of Harry. That's what I wrote on the Discord list.
Exactly. Yep, yep. Can't wait for people to see those.
As for this, it is Time Enough Podcast. It's Time Enough Pod on Twitter. That's the best place to find me because that's actually kind of my personal Twitter now too.
Nice, good.
uh, uh, you can support us on Patreon at Podcastio Podcastius, where we do way too many podcast films and filth. The Citizen Kane of podcasting is where we talk about the 100 best and the 100 worst films as rated by IMDb users. You are on the actual Citizen Kane, which comes out pretty soon. I
Man,
forget
I can't wait. That was a
that
great conversation. Thank you for
June
letting me
June.
do that.
Oh yeah, right on June 15th. So that's actually still in everyone
Cool.
else's future.
Yeah, yeah.
I call it Disney, where we talk about the weird side of Disney movies. A lot of stuff about like where the original authors and the weird societies they were part of and stuff like that. It's kind of
Nice.
interesting.
Yes.
Uh, my brain stopped working. Okay, there's video game ones, which I'm not on. Luke Loves Pokemon is about all the Pokemon families. Hyrule Field Report is about the Zelda games, and Game Show is a game show with gamers gaming each other. Whew. Okay. I guess I'm gonna. I don't know. This is my best time helmet within reach. I can.
Oh, that
Nice.
is a great time helmet. Put some sparklers on that. You're
It'll
set.
burn. It'll burn. This is. My wife hates this hat, by the way, but I live in the mountains, so it's necessary
You
in
need
winter.
it. Yeah, yeah. And like I'm sure we can get some LED sparklers. I'm sure that now there's a safe, non-flaming way to do that. It is the 21st century after all.
Or I could just start wearing this for all the podcasts and talking like this, eh? Do my strange brew every week. Okay, later, folks. Okay, that's enough time to spot. Yeah,
Love it.
thanks. Yeah,
Love
yeah.
it.
I had to cut myself off because I would just go on about this all day.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
so well, and you've inspired me. I'm adding. I see that I can buy Steamboat Bill from Kino on their app. So in the Kino app and have it on my Apple TV. So I'm gonna watch that tonight.
all right, on. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I would that one's great too. But yeah, I think Sherlock Junior is my favorite, partly because it's only 45 minutes. That helps a lot. Like it's
Yeah.
not that. I mean, and yeah, there's no time wasted in a silent movie, which
Yeah,
is
exactly. Yeah. Well, I might get them both. I mean, because they're really cheap. They're like $5,
and even
Um,
some of the Seven Chances is the lesser one, but the chase at the end is really good.
mm,
That's the
nice.
one where I mean, you see clips of it and other stuff all the time, where it's like the 500 brides are chasing him,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
then
Yeah.
boulders start chasing him. It's great.
Very cool.
um, let's see. While I have you on, I'll just check
Yeah.
things that you might be interested or that I put you down
Yeah,
for.
yeah, yeah.
The next film or filth is The Love Guru. Is that's August 31st. So
Okay.
I guess just keep me updated because obviously Vegas is at the beginning of August, so that's a bad time. But
Yeah, but you know what? I've got some time in that. Let's see. I mean, honestly, most of June, other than the last week of June, is going to be good. And then even in July, like I don't think we're doing anything for Comic Con. So coming up, kind of that last couple of weeks of June are probably going to look good too. Um, well, I take that back. The last week, the last week of July will be bad because we will be in prep for Vegas, whatever shape that will take. I don't really know what we're doing yet. But right up until that last week of July, with the exception of the last week of June, we'll be fine.
okay, I'll figure out something there because the next Twilight Zone I have you down for is October 1st. So we don't even have to
Oh,
think about
so we
that
got
now.
time. Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
post Vegas. Yeah.
and the other one, if you're, I hope that's not the right file. We did start doing a little bit of Space 1999, which I'm just doing like casually, and
Yeah.
then start
Yeah.
releasing them
You'll bank
on.
it for a while. Yeah.
Right, right, and I think I arbitrarily stuck your name by a few episodes if you're
Sweet.
interested. If I
Can't
can,
wait.
I have to
Are you
figure
doing
out.
season one and two?
Yeah.
Okay.
My question for season one is going to be how much of this episode is sci-fi fun and how much is existential dread. But I don't think that'll work for season two. That only works for season one.
Yeah, right.
So I'll have to think of a different
Exactly.
one for season two, but that's fine. I've never seen season two
Yeah.
to be honest, because I just like I like the existential dread factor, so I just never got around to watching season two. Same thing with Buck Rogers. I like never watched season two. I always want to see the season
Oh
one
God,
episodes.
it's so bad. There are a couple of good episodes, but it's really terrible.
Yeah,
Just
I think space.
completely.
It's more like what TOS season three, where there's some fun stuff there, but
Yeah,
it's not
yeah, yeah.
really up to snuff.
And there is some fun stuff in season two of 1999. It just tonally it's so different, you know. But yeah.
Right. Okay, I arbitrarily put your name next to Black Sun, uh,
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Death's Other Dominion,
Oh,
and
great.
Testament of Arcadia.
Dude,
Again,
they're all
we're gonna
yeah,
start. Of course, this starts getting released on September 13th, so there's lots
of
of time.
course.
We've already done Breakaway and Matter of Life and Death. So,
Nice.
although
Did
Matt,
Earl who did those with you?
that was just myself and Mark.
Okay.
Let's
Cool.
see. BC wanted Guardian of Piri and Voyager's Return. I'm dragging him into podcasting now. And the
Cool.
Infernal
That's
Machine.
awesome.
He wants to do a few films and filth as well. So,
Oh, that's great.
because Mark's like, I already thought he was a podcaster because he's
I know
also
he's got that kind of presence, you know. Yeah.
Earl wanted The Last Sunset and something else.
Cool.
Earthbound. Yeah. He said he'd done a podcast on Last Sunset before. But I'm like, I don't care. You can do it if you wanted. You can do it
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah.
And then Norman wanted Dragon's Domain and
Yes, of course, because he likes his big rubber monsters. So yeah.
yeah, and War Games. I do remember War Games
Oh,
being
cool.
a standout. That's
Yeah.
probably the bleakest one if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been a few years since I watched them, and also this was a this is a back when weed was around sort of show. Which, living in Japan, if
Right.
you decide to live in Japan, that's off the table. You
You
don't do
give
those
that
things
up.
anymore.
Yeah.
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 So,
Funny.
but yes, the first season was a stoner show for me. So a few episodes will be new to me, I guess.
Nice.
But
That's awesome.
okay, I'm gonna wrap it up now. We'll get the
Very cool, man.